Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. Thank you for joining me today on this episode. We're going to talk about kind of the state of the presidential race now that Kamala Harris has been a candidate for an entire week. We're at the end of July right now, and, we'll see what comes. But so far, what we've seen is just a coalescing around coronating her as the nominee. A week ago, I hoped that we would be in a situation where the Democrats would take this opportunity to open the field, say, who wants to run? Let's have a debate about this. Let's have an open primary. Let's fight this out a little bit, especially since the common complaint is that Kamala Harris got no votes in the primary. Joe Biden got 14 million votes and obviously basically ran unopposed, Dean Phillips notwithstanding. And the common refrain I'm hearing is constantly, from the right especially, not so much from the left, which is somewhat interesting, I think. The complaint is this is undemocratic, right? Because no one voted for her. There's a few things I want to touch on there a little bit, specifically that, yeah, of course this is undemocratic. I mean, we know that Kamala Harris is going to end up getting, at this point, because no one's running against her, she has enough delegates pledged that she will cruise to the nomination, which they're going to do early on Zoom again, same as they were planning on doing for Biden on August 7th, even though the convention's not till the 19th. That was originally because Ohio had some weird statute where it said you had to be nominated X amount of days before the general election, and because their convention's a little later than normal, it's in later August, it wasn't going to meet that deadline. So they were going to nominate him officially early. But Ohio's changed that rule and stuff, so I'm not really sure why they're doing this other than just to have the nominee officially and not have to worry about anything else happening. I agree. I wanted Democrats to do a more open thing, and I'm disappointed they didn't. But obviously, we don't know exactly what all is going on behind the scenes, but it's very clear that this is more and more has come out in the last week that Joe Biden was forced into this position. Now, some would call that a coup. I think that's ridiculous. This is still all within the rules of the Democratic Party. There is nothing that says in the Constitution or the law of the United States that we get to pick by popular vote in a primary our nominees for the party, for any position, but definitely not the presidency. This is a new thing that's only been happening for the last 50 years, and a lot of people aren't aware of that, and that's okay because, if you're under the age of 50, you've had primaries your entire life. If you're under the age of 70, your entire voting life has been where you go cast a vote in your state, and then different nominees win different states, and you get to the nominating convention, and sometimes they have to duke it out because sometimes it's contested. Someone doesn't have enough delegates, and so they got to fight it out, and that's where super delegates came in and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what happened here. We had Joe Biden running against Dean Phillips and a couple other no-names, and he won handily. And the problem is Democrats have a situation here where we've got two different narratives that you could possibly go with. They either wanted to get rid of Joe Biden because his debate performance was so bad they could no longer hide the fact that he couldn't do this for another term. Or it's because he was losing to Trump at the same time. And they thought, well, we better switch it so that we can get someone that could potentially win against him. I am for parties being able to do this kind of stuff. I know I'm in the minority. I get that. I think the parties should better control who they put up as nominees because we wouldn't get people like Donald Trump in 2016. We'd get a different Republican. Or you wouldn't get Bernie Sanders sniffing the nomination. Now, sometimes the parties can do the wrong thing. I think the Democratic Party coalescing around Hillary Clinton in 2016 was a bad choice. She was a bad candidate. They kind of let her. It was it was her turn. Obama told Joe he shouldn't run. There's some complications there, obviously, because Obama framed it, allegedly, as, well, Joe Biden, your son just died, Bo just died, you need to grieve, you need a break, you shouldn't put this on your shoulders right now. Some would say that's genuine. Some would say that they just wanted to coronate Hillary Clinton. whatever the motivation, I think it was a bad move. And Hillary Clinton ended up being a very weak candidate. Basically, everyone Hillary Clinton's ran against wins. She thought it was her turn in 2008. She makes Obama the nominee, essentially. She's such a bad candidate that everyone she runs against wins the presidency. Obama and then Trump. So she's not great at that, but they coordinate her anyway. Well, I mean, to me, you live and die by what the party does. So if the party says, hey, we think this is the best candidate we have, Kamala Harris right now, that's what seems to be happening, is basically the whole party has gotten behind her and said, she is the nominee, and they're super excited about it, and she's raised a ton of money, and she's holding all sorts of weird Zoom calls segregated by race and gender, white men for Kamala and white women for Kamala, and it's very strange. Can you imagine for just 1 second if Trump had a Zoom call with white men for Trump or white women for Trump? That would be eviscerated in media. It would just absolutely get, but for some reason when Democrats do it, they think it's okay. I think it's okay to segregate as long as, I don't know, I cannot figure, they're like pro-segregation because they think this is a good thing. I do not understand it. It's very Orwellian and weird. I don't like it. But that's what's going on. The Democrats have completely coalesced behind Kamala Harris in the last week. Completely. Immediately, Sunday night, Joe Biden steps down Sunday afternoon. Sunday night, we're talking about what's going to happen. Is there going to be a nominating convention? What's going to happen? But Sunday night, she's already like leaking her VP list and changes the complete narrative to who's the VP going to be. And no one is talking about who the nominee is going to be anymore. It completely changed the narrative there. Maybe Kamala Harris has more political talent than I have given her credit for. Maybe not. It's really yet to be seen, because the other truth of the last week is that we've really just not seen Kamala Harris in any kind of non-teleprompter, non-super friendly setting. She can't do that she can't do that through November. She can't possibly not do an interview with Lester Holt on NBC News or on, she's not done a real interview. She's not done any sort of press conference where she stands up in front of a room full of press and answers questions. She hasn't done that. It seems like the Biden campaign, which took over essentially they just scratched Biden's name out. Now it's Kamala. So she inherited Biden's campaign team. And so far, it seems like they're doing the exact same thing that they did with Biden. It's like, let's just try to keep him out of the public eye, and we will send surrogates, and we will let the media do our heavy lifting. And there's even a rally in, I don't remember actually where it was, but they basically wouldn't let the press even talk to the people that went to the rally. This is like a super controlled thing. Maybe they can pull that off. I don't like it. I do not like the lack of transparency. I do not like not having access to the candidate. I do not like that she has not answered some basic questions about what her policy preferences are. Her campaign is, but she has not told us what those policy preferences are. And I think this is going to be a problem for her because she's incredibly liberal. There's just no getting around it. The last time she ran for an office was in 2019 for the 2020 presidential election. She dropped out weeks before Iowa even happened. She was doing so badly. She was, like I mentioned, polling fourth, I think, in California, her home state. So she was not doing well. But in those debates and in the lead up to it, doing interviews, and she was very, very, very progressive. Way more progressive than even the Democratic Party is. And just to give you an idea, this is actually a campaign currently, I believe for the Pennsylvania Senate, sort of against her. So let's just run this because I think this is this is pretty good.
Kamala Harris Harris is inspiring and very capable. The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
The nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters in the fossil fuel industry?
Giving the workers an ability to transition. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation.
Abolish ICE. Yeah. Is that a position you agree with?
And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
Yes. Yes.
To reduce red meat specifically.
Yes.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on. I am opposed to any policy that would deny any human being public health, period.
The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
So those are just her words. These are not attacks on what she voted on. This is not any of that kind of stuff. This is her own words. Every candidate that runs for any office always is going to be further to the right or to the left or more pure or more ideologically pure in the primary than they are in the general election. This is a tale as old as time, okay? Politicians are going to moderate because they've got to get the primary votes first. This is part of my problem with the primary system, is that they've got to go after voters, specifically voters that vote in primaries are generally really ideologically to the right or to the left. They don't tend to be sort of in the middle. They also tend to be very single issue voters sometimes. So you got a lot of people on the right, for example, that their single issue might be Second Amendment stuff or pro-life or something. And on the left, it might be pro-abortion. It might be healthcare for all or Green New Deal or those kind of things. And so you have to run to those people because those are the people that vote in primaries. The truth is, most people just don't vote in primaries. We go back to 2016, it was 28% of the whole country of eligible voters voted in the 2016 primary. That's the last time we had an open primary on both sides after someone had ran for 2 terms, like Obama. And then if you go back to the previous time before that, which would be 2008, obviously would be the time before that, and then 2000 before that. So we've got these examples. And 2000, by the way, is only 17% of the population. We actually did have an increase in 2008. Decreased back in 2016. So not very many people, it's not the whole country that votes in these primary elections. It's like a quarter of the country tops. And you have to run to the far right or the far left and you moderate. So every candidate's going to moderate. And the last time we got to hear from Kamala Harris as a candidate, she was going for the far progressive thing because Bernie, the lesson everyone learned from 2016 is like, we should be further left than we are because Bernie Sanders almost won. Now, I think that's the wrong lesson to be learned from 2016. I've said this over and over again. I think people were attracted to Bernie Sanders' authenticity compared to Hillary Clinton's phony political, changing her accents depending on where she's talking, and she would say one thing to one room of people and the opposite to another room of people because that's the politician game. And Bernie Sanders just went out there, just like Donald Trump did, and just said exactly what he felt and exactly what he thought. Even if it was unpopular in that room, sometimes people, I think, were attracted to the fact that they would just say what they believed. But everyone learned the lesson from 2016 was that, oh, we've got to run super far to the left. So you saw Elizabeth Warren run super progressive to the left. You saw Kamala Harris do the same thing. Pretty much that whole field, other than maybe Joe Biden, a little bit of like Pete Buttigieg, as he's sort of more of a wonky policy, McKinley kind of guy. And so, but for the most part, everyone went far left. And it didn't work out for them in 2020. Like I said, Kamala Harris had to drop out before Iowa. So she never even made it to she didn't even make it to voting. So I think we learned the wrong lesson in 2016. So to be fair, she could have been lying about those positions in 2019. Plenty of people do pretend to be further to the right or further to the left. But I don't think that's the case because I've seen nothing with her as VP or even into the general election as the vice presidential candidate that showed that she moderated much. For the most part, she's just saying, I agree with all of Biden's stuff. Although there's some moderation there. One thing that's interesting that I think to point out is that both Biden and Harris are now saying, we will not raise taxes on anyone that makes under $400,000. Well, that's like 98% of the country, of the tax base. So essentially, they're saying they are moderating to Republicans. They're basically saying the tax cuts that Trump did in 2017, they like. Because do you know why they do that? Because they're broadly popular with the people that are going to show up and vote in November. So we don't really know who Kamala Harris is right now because Kamala Harris won't come out and do a press conference and be asked the questions like, hey, do you still agree with getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate so that you could pass the Green New Deal? Because I think voters should know that. I think that we should hear from her. Now, her campaign is saying that she's moderated on issues like she wouldn't ban fracking. They're saying that already. They are also saying she would maybe ban AR-15s, but they would not, or AR-style weapons, but would not do a buyback program. But in that clip we just showed, I mean, she has plainly said in the past that she would do a mandatory buyback program, that she's for not criminalizing crossing the border illegally. She's for, so there's all these things she's gonna have to deal with eventually. Now, the media is doing a great job at covering for her right now. So much so that they're actually deleting articles from the internet. This is actually happening. So GovTrack, it mentioned in that clip that I just played, mentioned she was rated her the most liberal senator in 2019, period. So that means she voted either against any sort of moderate or compromise policies. She was more left than Bernie Sanders. Okay? That's her voting record. That's not just her words. That's her actual voting record. While she was a senator, they rated her the most liberal senator in the whole of the Senate. There were 48 senators at the time that were Democrats. All of a sudden, that page has just disappeared from GovTrack. Now, what's interesting is that we have the Wayback Machine. We can go back and look at stuff. GovTrack tries to say, they've got a whole explanation of this. They said, well, we started, instead of doing single years, we did 2-year terms because that's how Congress is measured, is, in 2-year terms. And so we changed the methodology, so we've removed that rating. But they only did it 2 weeks ago. They changed their methodology a couple years ago. So it's not very believable. It seems like the thing they're trying to do is take down the thing that might hurt their nominee because Trump is such a threat that we have to do whatever we can to make sure he doesn't win. I think this is such a mistake because people see right through it. And if Kamala Harris wants to win this presidential race, she has to do it herself. People are generally distrusting of the media covering for one side. I realize that Democrats don't find a problem with it because they have been the beneficiaries of this for my entire life. The media's always had a leftward bias. And if you don't think that's true, you really got to pay better attention. They absolutely have a left-leaning bias. Now, do I think it works? They tried to cover for the last couple years, or I'd say even more than that, for Biden's age problems. They tried to tell us, no, this is, what did they call it? This is deceptive editing. They didn't say deep fake. They said something else where it's like they tried to write everything off that came from anywhere, any criticisms that maybe Biden couldn't do it. Everyone that came out, especially in the press that publicly said it, got crucified for it. And I think they've all been vindicated. The thing is, it didn't work. We can talk about the mainstream media and how they lie, because they do. They absolutely cover for Democrats. It's not just the GovTrack thing. Axios did the same thing. We're talking about her border czar history. She got put in charge of the border. Now, I think that was Biden not wanting to deal with a bad problem. And it's clear that there's some problems between Biden and Harris. I don't think it's all hunky-dory. And he was saddling her with something that he knew was a problem and that she would then get to take the brunt for it and not him. That's the truth of what happens. And that's what happens with every vice president. It's a crappy job. I don't want to have to edit myself later. So it's a crappy job. You have to take the brunt of the stuff the president doesn't want to have to take blame for. But the truth is, in 2021, he made her in charge of the border, and every press outlet ran with calling her the border czar. Yes, we don't really have czars in America. It's just a short style way to say it's a nickname for when someone's put in charge of a policy specifically, we call them the border czar or the AI czar or whatever. They're not really czars. It's not any specific position. We're just saying, hey, you are sort of in charge of this. Someone else had resigned. They basically said in a press release, look, Kamala Harris is going to take over the border from this person. She's going to be in charge of it. She's also going to be in charge of the relations with, trying to stop the flow of the migrants further south of Mexico coming up. All of this was true. Axios themselves, the same writer that wrote the headline, the thing that called her the border czar, now is writing today, she's not the border czar. No one ever put her in charge of the border. It's the same writer. They're just trying to memory hole all this stuff that happened because it's inconvenient to their person beating Donald Trump. It's gross. It's wrong. It's not going to work. It didn't work with Joe Biden. It doesn't work. Now, it does work in some of the margins. I mean, here's the thing. This race is still extremely close. I'm not going to talk about polls because I don't think polls are going to be accurate yet. Everything that happened before last week doesn't matter anymore. Donald Trump's lead doesn't matter. All the polling that said how he did versus Biden doesn't matter. Kamala Harris's polling, frankly, doesn't matter because she wasn't the nominee for president. So we will find out more in the coming weeks if this is working, is it not working. But here's the thing. Donald Trump has a really specific ceiling. He's never gotten over like 48% approval ever. Even after an assassination attempt on his life, it didn't really improve his standing in polls. So he's got a pretty hard ceiling that he's not seeming to get over. He has a very loyal base. This is just me getting into the wonky stuff. Sorry. He's got a very loyal base that's going to show up for him no matter what. No matter what. That's not how you win an election, though. There's this theory. There's kind of two different ways people run elections. They either say you got to turn out the base, and that's basically been the thing since 2008 is like, hey, if we just ramp up our base turnout, we can win this election at the detriment to anyone in the middle. And what I mean by in the middle is I mean just not hardcore, obsessed, and idolizing the candidate that's at the top of the ticket. And I don't know that it's a great way to do it. It has won some elections. That seems to be what Donald Trump's entire thing has been until now. Now he's going to have to shift, and we're starting to see how that's happening. It was actually pretty quiet. I don't understand how Trump's campaign didn't see this coming all along. They should have had a game plan for if Biden drops out and Kamala becomes the nominee. They should have had that game plan ready to go the day it happened. They didn't seem to, and so they're starting to try. But like, look, kudos to Donald Trump. He went in front of a group of black voters yesterday. I can't remember the organization, but went in front of them and answered questions and stuff. And like, good for him for trying to go outside of his base and getting votes, because the truth is he has to do it if he wants to win. Kamala Harris is going to have to do the same thing. She can't play this tape and get votes. She can't say the things like, yeah, I'd get rid of the filibuster to pass the Green New Deal. I'd say that you should somehow make people eat less red meat. I would confiscate guns. Like, she can't win the general election this November saying those kind of things. Right now, though, she's not moderating. Her campaign and the press are doing it for her. And that's what I don't like about this. So don't trust the media right now. Just in general, because right-wing media is going to go all in on the Kamala. This is a coup. This is undemocratic. Like I said, they have some points there. No one voted for her, but you know what? What do you expect? What else? What else could we do here? It does appear that Joe Biden, from the reporting I'm seeing, and this is getting really into the weeds, and so some of this is not confirmed, some of it's sort of plausible, but what seems to have happened with Joe Biden is that he had that debate performance. It was terrible. And it seems like ever since then, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and some other Democratic leaders have basically said, Joe, you should do the right thing, and I think you should step down in private. But I think that ramped up eventually to, you either do it or we are going to eviscerate you, and your reputation will be ruined. You can either step down yourself and potentially be seen as doing the right thing, or we're going to start hammering you, and more people are going to start coming out and saying they can't endorse you because we're going to lose down ballot races. We're going to lose the Senate. We're going to lose the House. We're going to lose governorships. We're going to lose all sorts of races because you refuse to step down, and we will start attacking you for it. That is what a party is supposed to do, guys. A party is supposed to win elections. That is when it really boils down to it, that's all the Republican Party, that's all the Democratic parties are supposed to do. They are supposed to win elections so that they can govern and pass legislation and policies. You can't do any of that stuff if you don't win elections. So I think parties should have more power. People think the parties have all this control. They don't really have that much control. This boiled down to Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. And by the way, you're going to say that you're going to say this is undemocratic. That's what Republicans are saying. That's what Trump is saying. That is going to be the attack line on this. But I think it's foolish because the truth is the Democratic Party did eventually get to where voters were. I know that in the primary, Joe Biden won 14 million votes, but he wasn't really running against anyone. But if you look at the polls, 80% of the country thought he couldn't serve again. And a majority of Democrats, it was up to 60% of Democrats thought he could not run again. He should not run again. He cannot do the job. I know that's not going to the polls, and I know that's not like voting, but in a degree, like the voters were absolutely demanding that Joe Biden be left on the ticket. And you could see it in the polls. Trump was winning. People were going, yeah, I don't like Trump. I think he's potentially dangerous, but it's also really dangerous to have someone that can't cognitively do the job in the office. And I'm tired of being lied to. So really, the truth is the Democratic Party did get to where voters were, if you believe polls. And look, and I think, gosh, I don't have the poll in front of me. It was something like 90 something percent of the country thinks that Joe Biden absolutely did the right thing by stepping down. So in some way, they are doing what's democratic. They're not doing it via like one vote, one person. They are doing it via polling and stuff. But you look at it, it's overwhelmingly evident that the country as a whole did not believe the media over their eyes when it came to the Joe Biden cognitive ability test. And so they're listening, technically. Now, like I said, I would rather have it gone through a primary system. I'd rather Joe Biden had stepped down a couple months ago and we'd have it like an open kind of contest. Kamala Harris says she wanted to earn it, but like that's not true. Behind the scenes, she was doing all the deal making to say like, hey, I'm going to put you on my VP shortlist. And it very quickly coalesced around. They didn't want any more chaos. It's been chaos for the last month and a half in the Democratic sort of primary with Joe Biden stuff, like since the debate. They didn't want that anymore. So that's fine. I just think that she's got to step up and actually do some press conferences. I think she needs to do some interviews. She has to moderate if she wants to win this election. I'm not going to make any predictions. It seems like it's neck and neck right now. I think either one of Trump or Kamala could win this race. And the truth is, I still don't think either one of them should be president. I know that's unpopular. People have asked me over and over again over the last few weeks, or I guess week, so would you vote for her? The truth is, I did not vote for Joe Biden in 2020 because I didn't like Trump. I think I've been open about that. Didn't vote for him in 2016. Didn't think he was fit for office. I think he did some good things in his first term. I think he did some bad things in his first term. I disagree policy-wise, a lot of the stuff, but we could set that aside, and I could say this. His attempt to steal the election in 2020, absolutely, there is never going to be a situation where I'm going to vote for him. At least that I can see right now. I just think that was a step too far. He claims the election was stolen. It was not stolen. There was no evidence it was stolen. Zero. And immediately when I start having arguments with people about whether the election was stolen or not, it turns into, well, you've got to at least admit that it was unfair in the sense that like the Hunter Biden laptop thing and the New York Post and Twitter and Facebook putting all this money into specific. Okay. I'm not saying there's not some people that put their thumb on the scales, but no one changed votes. There was no stolen election. If Mark Zuckerberg wants to spend a bunch of money to try to get the vote out and specifically spends that in areas where Democrats are potentially going to win, that is his prerogative as a United States citizen, just like it's the Koch brothers' prerogative to do so on the conservative side if they want to. That's not illegal. It's also not illegal for Twitter to take down stuff. Do I think it was wrong? Absolutely, it was wrong. They should not have shut up the New York Post for posting what ended up being verifiably true information about Hunter Biden's laptop. I agree. That was wrong. It was egregious. It was absolutely wrong. It might have changed someone's mind voting. I don't see evidence that it did. I don't know that Hunter Biden's laptop story would have been, if we just would have blown that out in the water and everyone saw it, that would have lost Joe Biden the election. I don't know. But the point is, votes were not changed. Donald Trump tried to change votes, though. He tried to find votes in Georgia. He wanted to send a different set of electors in the states that he lost so that he could steal the election. That's a step too far for me. I can never vote for Donald Trump. So then people were like, okay, well, would you vote for Kamala Harris this time? Well, I didn't vote for Joe Biden in 2020 because he picked Kamala Harris. I thought that was such a foolish choice. And I think I'm being vindicated on this point because, look, she's not going to be the best candidate for him. If he would have picked someone else, if he would have picked Amy Klobuchar or honestly Cory Booker or someone else, I mean, almost anyone else in that field of Democrats that ran, of course, he could have also picked governors and other people like that. I do not think Kamala Harris really helped him win that election. I think there are other VP candidates that would have potentially helped more. Of course, I don't know that VP candidates really matter that much. And generally, I don't care about VP candidates, except that we were dealing with a really old guy who very well could die in office. And I think that's also been proven out that it was the VP pick mattered in 2020. And I thought Kamala Harris was a very, very poor choice. I think she's far too progressive. I think she's not she does not take seriously the Constitution at all. That's my biggest problem with her. She has said outright that, in the debates with Joe Biden, she was like, come on, Joe, when Joe Biden was defending the Constitution and saying that the president can't just unilaterally act because Congress doesn't. That's not how our government works. Just because Congress doesn't do something doesn't give the president the right to sign a piece of paper to say, well, I'm going to make it happen anyway. And Kamala Harris mocked him for that position. That scares me. I don't want that person in charge of the White House. Now, to be fair, Biden signed a bunch of illegal executive actions. So did Trump. So did Obama before him. So did George W. Bush. This has been an increasingly problematic thing for the executive branch for 20 years now, is that when Congress won't do something, George W. Bush signed into law something that he said, I'm not sure this is constitutional, but we'll see what the courts say. That is not upholding your oath to uphold the Constitution. It's not. If you think something's unconstitutional as the president of the United States, you should not sign it. You don't have to wait for the courts. You can say, I don't think this is constitutional. I'm going to veto this, send it back to Congress, change the things that are unconstitutional about it, and I'll sign it. That's what the president's supposed to do. The courts are not the only check on Congress. He's supposed to be a check too. That's the whole point of this governmental system that we've created, is that Congress creates a law, the president can sign it or they can veto it. That's the first check. Even if the president vetoes something, Congress can then get a larger majority to send it back and basically make it veto proof. So that's their check on the presidency. If the president signs something that is unconstitutional, the courts can then say, actually, that's unconstitutional. So we have these separation of powers for a reason. And Kamala Harris would like to torch all that. She'd like to get rid of the filibuster. Filibuster is not a constitutional thing, but the filibuster is where you've got to get 60 votes in the Senate to do most legislation. That's the filibuster, is that you can't just have a simple majority rules. That's how the House works. So you only need to win by one vote in the House. You need to get 60 votes in the Senate to pass legislation or to do things like budgetary things and stuff. Now, they've changed that. They've gotten rid of the filibuster for like filling judges and the Supreme Court. And it's been deteriorated, and I think we've seen that it's not been a good thing that it's been deteriorated. The Senate is supposed to be a deliberative body. They're supposed to argue. They're supposed to think long-term. They are supposed to be, that's why we elect them every 6 years. Congress, the House, is supposed to be reactive. That's why we elect them every 2 years. So the House is the most populist body, in the sense that if they do stuff we don't like, we can get rid of them in less than 2 years, essentially, because their term starts in January. They're up for re-election barely over a year and a half later in November, 2 years later. The House is like that. The Senate is not. I think we need this filibuster. I don't like that she wants to get rid of it. I don't like that she plainly thinks that she can just sign executive actions like to ban guns. I mean, she said, if Congress won't do anything, I'll do it. That's not how our government works. And so I want to hear from Kamala Harris, because I don't trust her any more today than I did 4 years ago or 2 weeks ago when Joe Biden was still the nominee for president. I don't. And I think that most people aren't paying attention to that kind of stuff. Most people do not have, let me back up. Not most people. The people that are going to decide this election do not know what the filibuster is. They do not know, they probably could not name the three branches of the government. I'm just being honest here. The people that have not already decided who they're voting for right now, because you're either Like, there's a bunch of people that are really excited about Kamala Harris. She's raised a ton of money. There's a bunch of people that would simply vote for her because she's not Trump. There were a bunch of people that are going to vote for Biden too for that very reason. So basically, people are either anti-Trump or they're pro-Trump. But I don't think there's a lot of really pro-Kamala people right now. She's got to get some people that are pro-Kamala and the truth is, people are going to do that based on how they feel about the candidate. It's more of a feeling than it is based on any sort of policy. But I promise you, she's not going to win Pennsylvania. She continues to say she's going to ban fracking. Okay? She's not going to win Michigan and Wisconsin, these like Rust Belt states that she has to get. She has to win those states to win. Just the simple math of the battleground states. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. I don't think North Carolina is a swing. So she's going to pick a vice presidential candidate in the next week. I'm assuming it's going to be Josh Shapiro. I hope it's Josh Shapiro because it would make sense for it to be Josh Shapiro. It would be nice to have someone that kind of goes after it's amazing to me that Democrats are unwilling to call out the anti-Semitism on their side of the aisle. It really bums me out. I saw John King on CNN listing like, well, you know, he's a governor from Pennsylvania, or he's a first-term governor and he's Jewish, and there could be some setbacks. He basically included being Jewish for Josh Shapiro as a negative quality, like being a first-term governor instead of second-term governor. The fact that the Democrats are openly talking about how someone's Jewishness could be a problem for them electorally, you're saying out loud that you know you've got an anti-Semitism problem, frankly. Just like, you know, like I just think there's something there. And they're saying, this is on CNN. This is not some crank. This is like, they're admitting that on camera. There's people in interviews going like, oh, well, that could be a problem because the way he handled the protesters. Here's what he said about protesters. He said, he called them anti-Zionist. He didn't call them anti-Semitic. He was very careful about it. But he said, there's no place for hate. The truth is, they are treating the anti-Semitism on college campuses differently than if it was any other race or religion that was being attacked. If those were racist people towards black people, those college campuses would not have reacted the same way. I think that's plain to see for everyone. I think we all know that. Kamala Harris may not be willing to do that. Her husband's Jewish, though. Again, though, have some guts to come out and call out the fringiest parts of your party. It would do a lot, I think, to win the people in the middle to go like, yeah, I don't like anti-Semitism either. There's anti-Semitism on the right, too. Don't get me wrong. It's just that right now it's definitely rearing its head on the left with the whole Israel-Gaza stuff. So I think she could transform, but she's got to do it. I'm not into this, like, I cannot get behind the media and her surrogates and other elected Democrats coming out and telling us what Kamala thinks. We need to hear from Kamala. We got to see if it works. So the truth is right now, I couldn't vote for either one of these people, but I think it's reasonable for other people. I'm way in the weeds here, and I'm probably too principled sometimes. I think it's totally legitimate to go based on what's going on in the Democratic Party to say like, you know what, I'm voting for Trump. I don't like how liberal she is. I think that's fine if that's what you want to go. If you want to roll the dice, like I said, I think he's unfit for office. I think he could be very dangerous. I think most of his successes in his first term were because he hired good people. But now the Trump MAGA people think those good people that he hired are deep state or they're traitors. That's just the simple truth. They think people like Milley and Bolton and Bill Barr and all these people that said no to Trump at some point in his first term are traitors or part of the deep state. That's where the that's where the true MAGA people are. I think that's crazy. So to me, it's just too big of a roll of the dice to vote for Trump. But if you don't feel like it's a roll of the dice to vote for Trump, that's fine. I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm just telling you what I think his pros and cons are. And I don't see a lot of pros on Trump other than I agree with him on the margins more on some things than I do with Kamala Harris. I can't think of a thing that I agree with policy-wise with Kamala Harris. But here's the good news, or maybe not good news. Here's my hope. The truth is Democrats were getting hammered in down ballot races. They were potentially going to lose the Senate. I mean, it's kind of been, they were more likely than not to lose the Senate anyway. That's just how this swings. It's just, they are more vulnerable in states in this election, the third of the Senate that's up for election is just unfortunately benefits for them, benefits Republicans more than it benefits them. That's okay. Republicans are probably going to take the Senate. If Republicans keep the House too, I would not mind having a Republican-controlled Congress and Kamala Harris in the White House, because the truth is then she's going to have to just try to do stuff by executive order. And you know what we have right now is a Supreme Court that's not going to be okay with that. They've clearly, we haven't even talked about the Supreme Court decisions from June at all on this yet. And we'll get into that. Those are such long-term things that I can talk about them at any point, though. You don't have to talk about the week of. The truth is they've been moderating. Like, there was a decision that basically sort of moderated what the bureaucracy can and can't do based on how Congress gives them, Congress passes a law and says, we're going to create this agency, and then we let the agency make up the rules. The Supreme Court recent decision sort of dialed that back a little bit and said, you know what, in some cases, no, the bureaucracy cannot do this. They're unelected. There's no accountability there, so they cannot make rules. They can't make certain kind of rules. It didn't roll it back completely. You were going to see in the press that, like, oh, they completely removed all the kind of teeth from the bite of the bureaucracy of being able to do anything. And these agencies like the EPA or the IRS or any of these other places. That's not really true either. You're going to see hyperbole on both sides. That's just going to be the name of the game for the next few months. Maybe forever. It just seems like it keeps doing that. So, but there's nothing that I agree with Kamala. At least there's some things I agree with Trump. Like I said, I just don't think he, the person, is okay. I also think Trump's probably regretting his choice of J.D. Vance, which I said weeks ago. I said he won't pick J.D. I was wrong. I said he won't pick J.D. Vance because he wouldn't possibly pick someone that could outshine him. I do think there's clearly a sort of a subdued version of J.D. Vance we're seeing, and I think that they probably are regretting, because I don't know who J.D. Vance wins them. If Kamala Harris, a younger by standards of, we were talking about Biden being really old. Well, Trump is 78. She's almost 20 years younger. So the age thing all of a sudden is now a target on Trump. And if she picks someone like Josh Shapiro that kind of quashes some of the stuff on the left of like the anti-Semitism stuff, that could be a good combination. Not to mention he's the governor, a very popular governor in Pennsylvania, which is a state that she has to win. That's maybe the biggest battleground state is Pennsylvania. It's got a lot of blue collar people. It's got a lot of Jewish population. If she wins that, it's going to be trouble for Trump. I do not think J.D. Vance helps him in Pennsylvania. I do not think he helps Trump in Wisconsin or Michigan. I just don't buy that blue collar workers that don't pay that much attention to politics are going to be impressed by a guy that's a venture capitalist, Yale educated. It just doesn't seem, and when people try to pretend like they're Trump, it doesn't work. It's not worked for anyone yet. Everyone that tries to be Trumpy, it only works for Trump because he's Trump and it's authentic. And again, this goes back to my authenticity thing. People see right through it when you try to pretend you're Bernie Sanders or when you try to pretend you're Donald Trump. People go, you're not really, though. Trump is Trump. Part of Trump being Trump is changing his mind about stuff in a 24-hour cycle sometimes. And we accept it because we know it's genuinely him. It's weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but people take him at value, but people don't like when someone else tries to pretend to be like him. And that's what J.D. Vance is kind of doing. So I think they're going to regret the J.D. Vance pick. I don't think it's going to help him. I predict that if he loses, J.D. Vance gets thrown under the bus so quickly and his political career is over. And because this happens with everyone that cozies up to Trump, they end up getting stabbed in the back eventually. That's just the simple truth. It happens over and over and over again. No one that has cozied up to him has survived it yet, basically. Sometimes they get cast out and then they get brought back in. But for the most part, you get ran over by a bus at some point if you're with Trump. So we'll see what happens. I'm not this last week has not been terribly consequential other than the media just covering for Kamala constantly. So we will see if she ever comes out and actually starts talking to the press or answers questions about her policies. She's going to have to do that, though, because the top two things that are on people's mind when you look at polls are the economy and the border. She's going to be saddled with Joe Biden's economic policies. Whether that's fair or not, for Joe Biden or her. I certainly think Joe Biden did things to worsen inflation. I certainly think he spent a lot of money. So did Trump. I think that he was inflationary. I don't think his policies have been great. The economy's better than it was, but most people don't feel that way because they're seeing the price tag on the things they buy on an everyday basis. So they don't really care about the low unemployment rate. They don't really care about the rate of inflation going down. We're not deflating stuff. But I'm not sure Donald Trump has great plans for that either. He wants to deflate our currency. I don't think that's a great plan. We could get into that with an economist for sure, but we will see. I just don't see a lot of evidence right now that this is a game changer for Democrats, and they're definitely going to cruise to winning the presidency or even the House and the Senate. So my advice to you as a voter that cares about this stuff, because you're obviously listening to a political show, you care a little bit, is just be more nuanced in your ingestion of media. When you see everyone saying the same thing, I would be hesitant to believe that. So if you see everyone saying the same thing about Kamala, oh, she doesn't want to ban fracking anymore, and you see it on CNN, you see it on Axios, and you see it on MSNBC, and you see like the same thing. That is just them covering. I want to see more nuanced stuff. So if you, and same thing on the right, if you see everyone saying the same thing, I generally don't love that. And I'm not saying reporting of facts, I'm saying reporting of opinion changes or moderation or that kind of stuff, because sometimes the facts are real. When people, like, for example, the attempted assassination on Donald Trump, you can believe when everyone reports that the FBI director said that, yes, a bullet hit Trump's ear. It was actually not the director. It was the FBI came out and clarified that the director was wrong in trying to say that, oh, we don't know if it's a bullet. The FBI came out and said, we do know it was a bullet. And so, yes, I mean, in certain situations with the facts, we can listen to them. Like, we need to figure out and get to the bottom of what happened with the Secret Service on that day. Secret Service director resigned, and we got a temporary guy in there that's saying, yeah, it was a complete failure. Sometimes when we're listening to the actual source, but see, that's coming from the source. What I don't trust is when talking head person on CNN is trying to tell me what Kamala thinks about a situation. That I don't trust, especially when every surrogate is saying the same thing. I'm like, I want to hear it from Kamala Harris. I want to hear it from Donald Trump. You know, there's just like, you got to pay attention and you got to vote your conscience. I mean, the truth is, I don't think either one of these people are very qualified for being the president of the United States. I do not think Kamala Harris is a good executive. You look at her staff turnover, you look at her already flip-flopping on stuff. And I'm not saying politicians flip-flop. It's just part of it. We know they do that, but it doesn't seem like there's any convictions. They're not saying, well, look, I saw new evidence and I've changed my mind, or I've been persuaded to move this way. It's just like, well, conveniently, I'm not running in the primary anymore, and now I have to talk to a different group of people, so I'm changing my mind. Think about the motivation for what makes someone change their mind and decide if it's genuine or not. I don't think anything I've seen from Kamala Harris indicates that anything is genuine. I think she is genuinely more progressive. Maybe not as progressive as some of the stuff she said in 2019 because everyone thought they had to go super progressive. Maybe she's not that progressive. The truth is, she was pretty tough on crime as a prosecutor. In fact, I would say too tough in some situations. It's kind of ridiculous to me that she was putting people away in jail for really long sentences for marijuana possession and then admits that she smoked marijuana too. To me, that's hypocritical. But some of her stuff is like her Black Lives Matter stuff of like trying to bail out people that were being violent and burning down buildings and stuff. I think that's wrong. And I think she's going to have to answer for that. They're trying to frame it as the prosecutor versus the criminal, Kamala versus Trump. I think that's foolish because it's pretty clear that most of this stuff against Trump was what we're calling lawfare. It's not the New York case that he's guilty of, not a legitimate case. I don't believe for a second it was absolutely politically motivated, and to say otherwise is wrong. I think you look at the timing of all the other cases, whether they were legitimate or not. Like, I think the classified documents case was legitimate. I think that it will probably not happen now. I think it's legitimate. He had classified documents he shouldn't have. They asked for them back. He wouldn't give them back. But the timing of all of the prosecutions and the trial dates were to jam up Trump during this entire election cycle. And I think if it wasn't on purpose, then why didn't you not do it a couple years ago? Why did everything line up just in time for the election? You know, his first court appearance was in March, the week of Super Tuesday. Even if it's not lawfare, the appearance of it should have made people go, maybe we shouldn't do this. But it's clear that Democrats are desperate to get rid of Donald Trump. And I'm not saying I totally blame them, but they shouldn't bend the rules to try to get the guy. I think that he, just tell the truth. Tell the truth about his positions. Tell the truth about the things he did that were wrong. Tell the truth about why you think he's dangerous. Use his own words. That ad I ran for Kamala Harris, you could run for Trump too. He's saying a lot of things that are undemocratic, they're unconstitutional. You could do that same ad for him. You don't have to make stuff up. You didn't have to make up you didn't have to trump up the misdemeanor charge to be a felony to say, so that we can now run as him being a convicted felon. I think it's ridiculous. I'm not impressed with either side right now. I think our politics are broken. So that's it for me today. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Homeless Conservative. I appreciate you being here. The best thing you can do, the thing that helps me the most, is you can subscribe. You can rate the podcast on whatever you listen, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. That helps me a lot. You can also share it with a friend. I've got a bunch of short form content, minute-long stuff on Shorts on Instagram and YouTube. I'm doing some longer stuff, longer explainers, 5-10 minutes long on stuff too. Share those with people if you think they're interesting, if you think you learn something. That helps me a lot. That's the best thing you can do. So I appreciate you being here. I will catch you next time.